So welcome to an exciting business session. We have a great panel this morning. We have a fantastic topic. There's some good times ahead in Atlantic Canada, and we want to present on it, discuss it, and get ready for it because it's going to be a lot of fun. So just to start things off, I want to do a little group exercise here to kind of get in the mood, get adjusted to these lights that are blinding us up here. If everybody would just close your eyes for about 15 seconds, I want you to think about an exciting image. I want to take a poll when we're done. So close your eyes and conjure up that image of excitement. What says excitement to you? Okay, open your eyes. I'm going to take a vote by show of hands here. How many had an image like this one? Right? Fireworks, good way to start the day. How about that breakfast this morning? Were you thinking about a nice piece of chocolate cake would go down? Well, I think the image of cake for breakfast, that's something that we should all think about. How do we eat our cake for breakfast? Get that blood flowing, get that sugar up. And this morning we have some panelists that have worked hard to prepare. They have a great message to deliver. They're looking forward to your questions. And I'm going to just kick this thing off with a few thoughts on supply chain opportunities for mega projects in Atlantic Canada. Exciting things are happening in the port. You look around this year, there's been a lot of great developments. And what this means is we're getting ready, infrastructure-wise, service provision, everything else you can think of for what's ahead of us. Great examples. We handled a massive job on windmills last year, and it was groundbreaking here at Ocean Terminals, and it's pointed at the opportunities that are ahead of us in the power generation industries. Our Atlantic Pilotage Authority put a new pilot boat in here, the Chiboucto Pilot, an exciting addition to the port's service provision area to serve those big ships that are going to be coming in here. 250 feet of new dock at Halterm, accomplished and ready for that cargo that's coming with these projects in containers and in ro-ro. And Richmond Terminals, perhaps one of the most exciting developments in 40 years. 1,500 feet of new dock for multi-purpose ships located in the heart of the harbor, next door to Irving Shipbuilding, connected to our outbound highways and the nearby Fairview Cove Container Terminal. And we have a new property to market and take to market to do projects that require more laydown area, require more flexibility, and some ingredients that, frankly, were in short supply around our port. So that's an exciting development going forward. So today, I'd like to introduce our three panelists. So the first panelist is Patrick Brannon, a research analyst for the Atlantic Provinces Economic Council. Patrick has been with APEC for 15 years. He's the key author of the Major Projects Inventory, and as an economist, his areas of specialization include capital investment, resource industries, labor markets, demographics, and export markets. Perfect panelist to kick things off for us today. Patrick will be followed by Curtis Doiron. Curtis Doiron at Logistec is responsible for the marketing of their multi-purpose stevedoring facilities in Canada. Curtis is a native maritimer. He's been around this business a long time. It's safe to say that stevedoring is in Curtis's blood. He's a great speaker. He's got a great story to tell about what Logistec can do here in Nova Scotia. And Pierre Poulain from MAN Diesel and Turbo. Pierre is a new addition to the port family, one of our newest tenants here on the port. And MAN has some exciting plans in the region. Pierre is going to tell more about what their company is all about and why they are looking at the opportunities that are coming down the pipe in power generation, oil and gas, shipbuilding, and other heavy industries in this region, and what excitement is in the future.
Thanks, Patrick. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I do question your choice of your first panelist. You want a high-energy, upbeat panel, and you've got an economist leading off. I don't know about that. Maybe we can get some Kenny G playing in the background or something like that. APEC is an independent think tank dedicated to economic progress in Atlantic Canada. Maybe you should have gone down to the police station and got someone from a drunk tank instead of a think tank to kick this panel off, but I'll do my best. So this morning I'll look at some of the key projects underway in Atlantic Canada where there's opportunities for firms in Nova Scotia to play a role. The numbers I show you will come from APEC's Major Projects Inventory, which is a survey we do every year of firms in the region and their investment intentions. We have projects from as small as 25 million right up to the mega projects that you see on the map here. So this year we have identified 357 projects with a total potential value of $100 billion. So first, with the map, I'll illustrate where some of the biggest projects are located, where the big drivers of investment in 2012 and what we're looking forward to over the next few years. And you'll see a lot going on in the Newfoundland offshore. We've got the 3 big projects that are currently underway there. There's expansions or work on all 3 of those projects this year, so big activity there. Plus, we've got the Hebron project, which is well into the engineering phase and hopefully starts construction next year. Then we go up to Labrador. We've got a lot of mining activity, especially around the iron ore mining sector. And then the Lower Churchill project, the Muskrat Falls facility, and the transmission down through the island of Newfoundland, and then the Maritime Link into Nova Scotia. And here in Nova Scotia, of course, there's a renewed sense of optimism around what's going on in the offshore. Shell's plans to expand here. And of course, the shipbuilding is the big one that everyone is looking at over the next few years. Up in New Brunswick, there's a big potash expansion currently underway, and hopefully some more expansion in the mining sector there. So this slide, we're looking at what's happening in the current year. So out of that $100 billion of investment that we were looking at previously, there's about $12.8 billion expected to be spent in 2012. And of course, you'll see on the chart the red line, Newfoundland and Labrador, is dominating that growth over the last few years. We expect about $8 billion of investment on major projects in Newfoundland and Labrador in this year alone. So in Newfoundland and Labrador, the 2 big areas of focus are the energy sector and the mining sector. Looking at the energy sector first, there's been tremendous growth over the last few years in terms of what's going on in the investment side. Up from about $1.5 billion in 2009 to $3 billion last year, and up again to about $4.5 billion in 2012. A lot of the work underway this year. Some of the highlights: the Terra Nova project is expanding, is improving its production vessel. There's a lot of work on the field itself. That's a big part of investment this year. The Hibernia and White Rose fields are both expanding to add new fields to keep production at a high level. So there's still a lot of work going on there. And exploration continues offshore with 2 or 3 wells to be drilled this year. Looking forward, we've got 2 big projects on the horizon, very large projects around the Hebron field. Employment there is expected to peak in 2014. Several of the major components will be built in Newfoundland and Labrador, including the gravity-based structure and components of the top sides as well. And then the Muskrat Falls project, hopefully we'll hear something on sanctioning of that project by the end of this year. And that's currently listed at about $6.2 billion, but it sounds like it may be larger than that by the time it gets underway. And then the other big area, of course, is mining, where there's considerable activity going on in Labrador, but there's also the Long Harbour processing facility that Vale's working on. It's a $3.6 billion project, and about $1.2 billion of that is being done this year. So massive amount of investment in that facility alone. Plus you have what's going on in Labrador. The Iron Ore Company of Canada is doing a lot of expansion there. A couple of direct shipping iron ore projects are underway. And there's $234 million of exploration going on in Newfoundland and Labrador this year alone. So that certainly bodes well for future developments in the mining sector in that province. So looking back to the Maritimes, it has been declining over the last few years in terms of overall major project investment. That's because of the ramp up in the stimulus, and then that's been declining as the provinces scale back their capital plans and the federal government scales back its stimulus as they both try to get their fiscal houses in order. So the biggest projects underway in the Maritimes, we've got a $1.7 billion project underway in New Brunswick near Sussex, potash mine expansion, and the biggest one in Nova Scotia currently is the Deep Panuke project, which is soon to be wrapping up. So looking in a little more detail what's going on in Labrador, a majority of the mining investment that I mentioned earlier is happening in that part of Newfoundland. The region continues to establish itself as a resource powerhouse. That's clear from the growth on this chart. We seen investment increase from about $100 million in 2009 to about $1.1 billion this year. And looking ahead, we see a lot of potential in Labrador as well. The red bars kind of show projects that are still a little bit away from full approval, but projects like the LabMag iron ore project, the Kami iron ore project, and the iron sands project near Goose Bay could push investment in Labrador up to close to $3 billion by 2014. And that rapid expansion in iron ore and mining is not just happening in Labrador, it's happening on the other side of the border in Quebec as well. There's over $20 billion in potential projects in iron ore mining and other mining in that province, and the Plan Nord that the previous government had been pushing has really fired up investment in Quebec. And all these projects are benefiting from that kind of gray area on the chart, the Labrador Trough, which is a massive ore body throughout Quebec and Labrador. So this slide highlights where the largest projects are in Canada and how the Atlantic projects stack up. Of course, the national shipbuilding strategy, the Halifax component of that, is massive, $25 billion project, much larger than anything else in the rest of the country. While the other projects like Hebron and Muskrat Falls are large as well, there's a lot going on, obviously, in Alberta, and that's really, we've got 6 projects there with about $60 billion of investment. And as these projects get underway in Alberta and as the shipbuilding moves forward and Hebron and Muskrat Falls move forward, those labor shortages that we're seeing in certain areas will intensify. And we expect that to increase over the next few years as many of these projects move into their peak construction phases. So the last slide I'm going to show in my opening is this one, which shows the mega projects. So everything over $500 million on our list, and we've projected the medium-term outlook for activity in Atlantic Canada. So these are the real drivers of investment activity. And you'll see that, that mid part of the decade, 06, 07, there really wasn't a lot on the mega project side going on here in Atlantic Canada. There was quite a bit in New Brunswick in the later part of the decade around the energy sector, around the St. John area. Then it's Newfoundland that really took off and has been leading the charge in terms of overall investment activity in this region. And we expect that to continue at a very high level through to 2016 as projects like Hebron and Muskrat Falls move ahead. A few other projects in Newfoundland that I just want to mention that could add to this value towards the later part of the decade. We've got Husky's examining a drilling platform to develop more of its fields in offshore Newfoundland. Once Hebron is finished in 2017, they're likely going to turn attention to Pool 3, which is another part of the Hebron project. That's a $3 to $5 billion development in that province. And there's several other mining projects and mineral projects that could go ahead as well. And the Mizzen field is another one in the offshore that we should be keeping our eye on. Statoil's filed a significant discovery license a few years ago, and they're doing more exploration this year on that field, and hopefully that's the next one that'll be on tap in Newfoundland. So in the Maritimes, currently investment is low. In New Brunswick, aside from the potash mine that's currently underway, there is potential for a second potash mine in that province. There is a company examining that and doing some exploration now to determine whether that's feasible. There's talk of an east-west pipeline from central Canada into the Irving refinery, which would provide a boost, but those are far from certain at this point. Here in Nova Scotia, those yellow bars that you see on the chart are starting to expand, and we expect those to keep growing as projects like Shell's work in the offshore and the shipbuilding move forward. Shell's expected to start some seismic work next year, and hopefully drilling a few wells in 2015. And then the results of the call for bids for the offshore is expected this November. So hopefully we'll see another company or maybe even Shell expand its land holding in the offshore and ramp up activity in the offshore of Nova Scotia. The shipbuilding project, of course, is huge. It sounds like the bump won't start until 2015. The project will take some time to get started, and most of the effects of that project, the big effects of that project, will be later in the decade. Lastly, the last thing I want to mention on the opportunity side is tidal power, which it's moving forward fairly slowly, but there have been some setbacks, but the province remains committed to it, and it remains a big opportunity area for the province, and certainly the Port of Halifax will play a role in that. So in terms of opportunities, there is a record level of investment underway in Atlantic Canada, and it's expected to remain at a high level over several more years. We have record investment this year. We have $100 billion in potential investment overall, which is also a record for the region. And there's several mega projects to look forward to that could keep activity at a very high level again, well into the next decade. And the outlook for investment in this region, from our perspective, is in a much better place than it has been in a long time. So I've highlighted the opportunity, and now Curtis and Pierre will talk about what their firms are going to do to take advantage of that opportunity.
As Patrick mentioned, I work with Logistec Stevedoring, who are a long-term marine services company operating in the Port of Halifax for over 40 years. Those of you who have heard or know the name Logistec may have noticed that I did not refer to the company as a stevedore, but as a marine services company. That's because out of necessity and the desire to diversify, we've evolved from simply a stevedoring company to a marine services company operating a diverse portfolio of business in the supply chain logistics and environmental services industry. But before I go into detail about who we are and what we do, let me first ask a question to you all. What do you think of when you hear the words supply chain logistics or cargo handling? I ask because, as this guy looks pretty curious, our industry sometimes generates some pretty strange looks. Do you envision a busy container terminal bursting at the seams, moving cargo in and out to destinations all over the world? Maybe you think of it when climbing into your German, Japanese, or Korean vehicle that you drive every day. Perhaps it's the huge wind turbines you see when driving between New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, which incidentally, that one was handled through the Port of Halifax last year. Or maybe it's one of Canada's best-known resources like grain or forest products. Really, the answer is all of the above. The truth is, the marine transportation industry presents substantial opportunity for this region, and one needs to only consider the large mega projects that Patrick reviewed being slated to be developed as evidence. Now, the marine services business has evolved dramatically over the years. As you can see from its early days, from this picture, cargo handling was an arduous and slow process. This is a picture from many decades ago showing a marine operation taking place in the Port of Halifax. And many of you may not be aware, but your very own George Malik spent time before joining the HPA on the docks. There he is, supervising a cargo discharge. Now, I'll provide a brief introduction to Logistec. As mentioned, I work with Logistec, and we're a marine service provider operating currently in 36 terminals and 24 ports in North America. In addition to cargo handling and terminal management, we have interests in rail, Arctic, marine transportation, ships agency, PCB management, aqueduct, and water main rehabilitation. We are a publicly traded company on the Toronto Stock Exchange and are headquartered in Montreal. As you can see, we have operations as far west as Thunder Bay, as far north as Churchill, and as far south as Port Manatee, Florida. And in Nova Scotia, we currently operate in Halifax, Sheet Harbour, and Sydney. Halifax, we've been here for over 40 years. We've invested heavily, particularly in equipment, and we feel that provides a significant competitive advantage for the Port of Halifax. Several years ago, Logistec, for example, located a heavy lift crane in the port, which alone contributes to attracting large project cargo that would have otherwise moved through other ports where crane costs are cheaper, more competitive. This put us on the map for project cargo, competing with other ports on the East Coast, Gulf, and Montreal. On the opportunity side, offshore and mining developments present great opportunity in cargo handling, such as on-dock fabrication and cargo resupply. Industrial developments like wind, shipbuilding, and hydro involve the import materials such as steel and components. And all of these markets have the potential to generate new business in cargo handling sectors, such as general cargo, project, containers, as well as complementary services like warehousing and inland transportation. So we have to ask ourselves, how do we attract this business to this region? There's certain rules of the game to be even considered in some of these markets. You need to have a competitive inland service for both rail and truck. You need to have proper access to and from the port, especially in the case of over-dimensional cargo. You need to be as close as possible to particular projects. And you need space, and a lot of it. On the service side, there are certain competitive advantages that stand out between ports. For example, an efficient workforce that meets the needs of complex client base and which changes direction on a dime. Skilled labor and management workforce with the experience and confidence in delivering, which, by the way, is a quality that in our industry is becoming very difficult to find. The ability to raise capital for infrastructure projects in particular, such as terminal expansions or equipment to better service the customer, is a major requirement. Halifax has or is making headway in all these areas, from the support of CN by providing competitive inland service, to the investments being made at Richmond terminals. I have to say Halifax is positioning itself well to capitalize on the regional projects taking place in the oil and gas, offshore, and wind energy sector, just to pick a few. Halifax has had a continuous success in handling general and project cargo through its docks. Services like Wallenius Wilhelmsen, ACL, Bowery, Hogue, and others continuously drive RoRo and project cargo through Halifax to markets as far away as British Columbia. We have regular movements of export military cargo, for example, on Bowery vessels to the Middle East. Halifax has recently been named as the port of choice by Vale for the transshipment of its containerized and resupply cargo coming to and from Voisey's Bay and Long Harbour. And we have regular project cargo business hitting every sector imaginable. And on the subject of that, aside from local regional cargo, Halifax's number one competitor, this may surprise you, in the project cargo market is Houston. It may not make sense when looking at a map, but when you consider the huge volume of project cargo carriers calling annually in the Port of Houston, along with an extremely competitive rail corridor leading north all the way to Canada, Halifax on the project cargo side competes regularly with Houston. The recent addition of Sheet Harbour to the HBA's mandate helps to round out this region's service offering. For example, we've always had a challenge attracting large overdimensional cargo to Halifax simply because of the terminal location, and roads servicing it do not always allow for that kind of cargo. While the Richmond terminal expansion will certainly help, Sheet Harbour offers substantial space with good highway access and these challenges are therefore not so prevalent. Sheet Harbour is also ideal for bulk cargo, which typically requires a great deal of space, often comes with environmental considerations, and there is a NIMBY, or a not in my backyard effect, in the bulk business. As you'll recall from Patrick's earlier presentation highlighting some of the projects throughout Canada, these great opportunities in the renewable energy, offshore, hydro, mining, and shipbuilding sectors, each port representing its own unique competitive advantages, Halifax and Sheet Harbour are ideally positioned to compete in this marketplace. For Halifax in particular, opportunities to watch out for in the wind sector is both the import components for projects such as South Canoe and Sable Wind, and potentially for exports from DSME Trenton. Shipbuilding may generate import steel cargo, for example, and components over the latter part of this decade, and expect continued developments in the oil sands to result in regular cargo movements on conventional and RoRo vessels calling the port. In Sheet Harbour, expect growth in business not only from existing business like wood chips, but also from wood pellets, as there is still pent-up demand in foreign markets. General cargo, especially in the offshore and wind sectors, will present great opportunity, and new opportunities are expected to service in the bulk markets like fertilizer, aggregates, and others as we work with the HBA to build our collective business in Sheet Harbour. Lastly, we of course cannot ignore the opportunities in the Arctic and northern Quebec in the mining sector. These mega projects require huge staging ports for the construction and resupply of these mines, and Sheet Harbour offers abundant space and is an ideal marine location to service that market. I hope you agree that Nova Scotia is on the cusp of accomplishing great things over the coming years, and if I can leave you with one message, it'd be this. Are we doing everything we can now to position ourselves in the best possible way to participate in mega projects happening now and well into the future throughout Canada? Thank you.
So thank you very much. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Halifax Port Authority, to giving this opportunity to introduce MAN Diesel and Turbo, one of the newest company to set up business in Halifax and Atlantic Canada at large. So exciting time for us and also for the region. So MAN Diesel and Turbo, it's an international company based out of Germany. And the biggest part of the company is truck and buses. If you've traveled to Europe or even Southern America, you'd notice a lot of the buses and trucks have the MAN logo in front. And so that's a large part of the company. And if you look on both sides, it's about 12 12 billion euro a year from the bus and truck side of the company. And then there's another side, which is the power engineering, which include MAN diesel and turbo. And on that side, you have the marine propulsion side of the business with very large diesel engine, and also power generation for diesel electric power generation. So those are the main area that we cover. And MAN Diesel and Turbo Canada is really focused in this area for Canada. And also we have Rank, which is part of the company that focus on renewable energy, wind energy. So that's the other area. So altogether, when you look at a company like MAN Group, it is about 16.5 billion euro a year, and over 50,000 employees. And on a MAN Diesel and Turbo side, we're looking at about 6,000 to 8,000 employees. So it's a good, good sized company. And one little fact that very few people know. Does anybody would know who MAN is controlled by? The major owner of MAN Diesel and Turbo, very well-known company. So it's Volkswagen. Volkswagen owns over 76% of MAN Diesel and Turbo. So we're part of a very large group, and we're involved in many ways in other areas like the car business. So that's fairly new and very exciting for a company to be associated with and owned by Volkswagen. So the area that we focus on MAN Diesel and Turbo is the engine and marine system. That's the largest area. We also do turbo machinery, so any gas turbine model, compressor, steam turbine model that we cover. Power plant, and power plant is very key to our business in Canada. Actually, in Canada, we're the second largest center in the world to manage power generation project. So we have a full team that go through the tendering, the design, the construction, and even operation of power plant in many areas of the world, and that's driven out of Canada. And the newest part of the business that we introduced in Canada, which is the MAN Prime Serve, and that's the after-sale part of the business when we support our customer from parts, service, and maintenance contract, which is a very popular trend in the industry right now. Prime Serve, as I just said, we're looking at large bore engines. So when we talk large bore engine, people have a hard time to understand the massive size of those engines. We go from 450 kilowatt, which in most people, what you have seen, it's a fairly large engine, about the size of a car. And we go up to about 89,000 horsepower, which, to give you an idea of what that is, it's about 5-story high building. And when you go on the ship, or mostly on the ship with that size of engine, somebody opens the door and you walk in the crankcase of the engine and you walk over the crankshaft. So it's a very different dimension than what we're used for, and a very interesting business. And when we think about how the shipping is done, this basically that type of engine that brings most of the goods that are shipped in ports with. So when we look at that type of engine, MAN diesel, the slow speed engine, very large engine, we power over 80% of the large ship that's out there. So it's a big portion, and it's an important part of our business. But we also cover the medium speed, which, not to get too technical on you, it's a little smaller. An example of that would be the newer ferry for Marine Atlantic, the Newfoundland ferry, they're powered by medium-sized MAN diesel engine. So, what we offer here out of Nova Scotia is full service, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. And worldwide, we have a network of over 120 locations, which sort of is a differentiator in the industry. As if you're a ship owner or a ship operator, it's very easy to gain access to our service. And in Canada, that was missing, and now it's came on board since the late part of the summer. So what we did this summer was MEN made the decision last year to open facility in Canada, and we opened two main facility, the Halifax location, which I'm representing, and the Vancouver location, which we also opened in August. And we have our head office in Canada, which is our Oakville office, which has been in Canada since 1942 under a different name, and it's really specialized in that power generation business. So during our discussion, I'll give you a little more of the details of what brought us here, the exciting projects that are coming along. I just wanted to give you an overview of a sense of who was in MEN, what we offer, and the type of product that we provide. And on that, anybody in the room knows who invented the diesel engine? Any suggestion? Dr. Rudolf Diesel, between 1893 and 97, and Dr. Rudolf Diesel was an employee of MEN Diesel, so we like to say we're the birthplace of the diesel engine. So looking forward to our panel discussion. Thank you again for taking a few minutes to listen to my presentation, and thank you.
We'll start the conversation a little bit with a question to Patrick Brannon. Aside from projects in Atlantic Canada, what about in the greater area projects that might have interest for Nova Scotia supply chain companies?
Right. I touched on Quebec a little bit around the mining sector, but also further north into the Arctic and Greenland, there's a lot of resource potential, huge amounts of resources there, and they're starting to be developed more and more. And there's a $4 billion iron ore mine that's being considered for Baffin Island. There was $110 million of investment in exploration in Greenland last year. So that really is starting to open up in the north, and it will take some time to get to at a high level, but it's definitely something that Nova Scotia firms should be thinking about and positioning themselves to take advantage of some of those opportunities. Yeah.
In line with Patrick's comments, Curtis and Pierre, would you have some additions on projects in the greater region, what might be possible there?
Yeah, I think when you consider some of the developments and potential in the Arctic, in particular, a lot of the, because of the seasonality aspect of working up there, the concept that seems to be prevalent is the establishment of hub ports to do things like fabrication of modules and that kind of work in a port environment where I mentioned earlier requires a great deal of space. And there are terminals such as Sheet Harbour that are potentially well positioned to take advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah, so on our side, we actually had a very interesting project that we started in the winter in northern New Brunswick in the Belledune port, and that's the first for us in Canada, but we believe strongly it's going to be an area of growth. It's power generation module that we built for a northern Quebec mine that we're finishing actually this week and should be shipped by the end of the week to northern Quebec before the weather gets too bad. So I'm just using that as an example of the mining business, the opportunity that it brings to Atlantic Canada. In this case, the customer was Xstrata, so we worked with Belledune on this project, which was a first for them in the new facility they built. But that's just one example of the future project that can be developed and will need good facility, just like mentioned, with space available for us for that type of project for 6 months period, and good access for large barge. So yeah, we definitely share that.
Building on the question around infrastructure, I'd like to ask all three panelists how big a concern labor force availability is in the sector of project development over the next few years.
Yeah, I guess I'll start. I think it's it's a huge issue certainly to look at. I touched on it a little bit in one of my slides, but it's already an issue in Newfoundland and Labrador. Certain industries in the region across the country, like engineering and some of the skilled trades, are already facing it because of what's going on in Labrador and Alberta, and it is increasing labor costs certainly across the country. In those key industries, the cost of projects are rising, and there will be a tipping point at some point, whether or not it's with those large international firms that are driving the big projects, or it's actually the little guy that wants to do some work but can't do it because his labor is being pulled into these large companies. There are some concerns across the spectrum, I think, over the next few years.
On our side, labor availability is not a unique problem to certainly this region. It's actually, for the most part, an industry-wide problem, particularly skilled labor, both from and not just labor, but even management as well. Our conventional break bulk business has really evolved over the recent years. A lot of what cargo has been traditionally moved break bulk has gone into containers, et cetera. So when you consider these larger, more complex projects, there's an element of skill set there that is lacking, and it is a major challenge. And to be honest, we've got a lot of homework to do to figure out how to address the problem.
Yeah, well, I'm in the middle of that as I'm hiring for a new position in the region, and what we find is our area is a very specialized area for marine engineers. And there's very good people in Canada, but very few available. So that brings a challenge, and also an opportunity to look at other area and attract people to the region based on those opportunities. So as a beginning, we see it as a good solution to bring people with good experience, and then, as we build our strength, try to focus on younger candidates coming out of the good school of the region and work with them to develop them in our business. So,
I'd like to ask all three panelists and kick off with you, Patrick. What are the key risks that we need to be aware of that could derail some of the project opportunity going forward?
Well, along with the labor issue, I guess commodity prices is the big one, especially for the mining sector. China is weakening a bit, and the commodity prices have slowed over the last few years. We saw what happened during the recession. There were projects in Labrador and Quebec that slowed a lot during the recession, and we had mines in New Brunswick and here in Nova Scotia that closed because commodity prices fell to a level that they weren't sustainable. So certainly that's a big area to watch out for. I think the offshore in Newfoundland is a little more insulated because those projects have longer development timelines, but mining especially is one where we have to watch the commodity prices.
Curtis?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Patrick. The commodity prices in particular are one to watch, but the other thing, a couple of things I would add to that is, I mentioned it in my presentation, is planning. We are, in my industry, very much more of a sunset industry, or maybe that's maybe too negative way to put it, but really we're operating in a mature industry, and as such we sometimes have blinders on what to do to be more flexible and understand what the needs of the customers are and adapt accordingly. And the same can be said with the labor force in some cases. So, it's up to the employers and industry to champion the cause, but certainly that item has to be addressed to be able to capitalize on these opportunities. And secondly, I would say infrastructure is a major challenge. If you don't have the infrastructure, I think Jeff said this morning, you're not in the game, and that's very true in that industry.
I have a question from the audience for Pierre, and it asks you to comment on why your company chose to open a facility in Halifax, Dartmouth, and what some of the background on that is.
Yeah. Well, as I'm sure most people heard about NSPS, apparently MAN did too. So when that certainly raised the level of interest for the company in this area. In addition to that, we currently have a contract with the Canadian Navy to do maintenance on their frigate's main engine. So as the priority in the company shifted more towards customer service and customer support, part of that overall plan was to establish a number of those prime serve bays all over the world, and Nova Scotia being one of it. So that's one of the reasons, and also in order to grow that business, we got to be close to our customer, and traditionally this business has been run out of Europe, and as we experienced in the U.S. and now in Canada, proximity really drives a good level of business, and so it's a great area for us to be able to do that.
As a follow-on, I got a question. Any one of you can chime in on this one. It's about the rail. One of the prime concerns in the mega project environment is having the right infrastructure. Can you comment further on how the rail connection is an advantage with regards to serving this industry? I don't know, Curtis, maybe if you want to.
Yeah, I think, good evidence of where we've seen very good support on the rail side in recent years is from, in this case, in Halifax CN, has been, if you watch the volume of ro-ro cargo being moved, for example, to Alberta and the oil sands. If we operate in several facilities throughout Canada, and if somebody asks me, what port or ports would you say you handle the most volume of cargo, let's say, for the oil sands, it's always Halifax. And, obviously the carriers are a big part of that, but none of that would be competitive through Halifax without the support of rail. And working closely with some of CN's project people, they're really getting very entrenched in that industry and really contributing to help bring business to Halifax. So I think they've done a good job. It could be replicated in other ports potentially, but Halifax has done good by that.
Yeah, for us, the same. It's a very large. We have a very large component, and the mode of transportation are fairly limited. It's either through ships or rail. So, in order to, develop that Canadian business, we definitely need access to the rail service.
I have a follow-on question here from the audience, and it is something that we'll have all three of you give comment on. And maybe we'll start things off with Patrick. What is the level of global awareness of the opportunity surrounding mega projects in Atlantic Canada? And any ideas or opinions on what can be done to better market the region to attract investment as a result of these opportunities?
Yeah, I don't think there is that level of awareness, and we recognize that through APEC, and we do our annual major projects event in 3 of the 4 Atlantic provinces, and we're planning this year to do it in Toronto to raise that level of awareness about what's going on here, because there's such a tremendous amount of opportunity in the region, and we hope we can kind of push that into the Central Canadian audience.
It's interesting. I mean, I was at the Journal of Commerce Breakball Conference in Antwerp in May of this year, and I arrived a day early, and there was a voluntary business session that was on. I did not know what the topic was, but I arrived, and this is in Belgium, and a gentleman stands up from Fluor's Vancouver office and presents the Valley project in Newfoundland. So I found that quite incredible, sitting in Belgium to learn about something in my backyard. But I think that's evidence that there's certainly been some level of awareness that's been raised You know, if I go to these conferences and I see particularly some of the major global players on the project side, for example, shipping lines, I would argue that a lot of them are aware of some of these opportunities, but it's one of these things. I don't think you could ever not do enough commercial marketing for globally for these opportunities. It's the more the merrier.
Pierre, I'm going to follow up on that one about the man location here. And can you talk about some of the benefits for Atlantic Canada by opening your office here and where you will go forward in the future?
Yeah. It was actually interesting. In end of August, we had the official opening, which we had the senior people from the company attending. And for all of them, it was their first time in Nova Scotia. They've heard about it, but never had an opportunity to come visit. And it was a great eye opener for them, even though they already made the strategic decision to develop the business in this area. I picked them up to the airport and drove them to that woodsy road towards Halifax, and could look at them wondering where I was taking them to. But after 3 days in Halifax and having the opportunity to meet some great people along the way, they left with a very different impression of what our region was offering and the opportunity that exists there. So I think it's important, to showcase our part of the country, and when people have that opportunity to really realize what's here and how exciting it is for the business. So what brought us here, it was, as I mentioned before, NSPS is part of that. Our current commercial business and growing, I'd say over the last year we sold probably 8 vessel main engine and power generation, which might not seem like a lot, but trust me, in the Canadian industry, it is a lot. It is a lot in a short period of time, and we want to be there to keep supporting that. Also the proximity to Europe from a strategic location in the Port of Halifax, and access to all the northern project is a key area. And there is also great governmental agency support to help company like us establish yourself in this area. And as I experienced between the West Coast and the East Coast, the East Coast is a much more welcoming business area from that support point of view. So that's some of the reason why we established ourselves in this area.
We have a question here I think all three of you can comment on. It's onshore oil and gas potential in Atlantic Canada, what the outlook might be in that sector, and do your firms see some opportunities around that sector?
The natural gas environment is very difficult right now, just because of the environment in the United States, the tremendous amount of gas that's being produced in shale, as well as what's coming in through the import terminals. So it's definitely a tougher market at the moment. The dynamic is really changing in North America. There's a lot of that, and it's affecting prices and the environment. And we see what's going on in the oil sector in western U.S. around the Bacon fields in North Dakota, and how Irving's now shipping oil from those fields. It's really changing the dynamic. And Nova Scotia and New Brunswick certainly have some of those fields that will require some fracking to extract that resource in a lot of cases. So there are environmental concerns there, but it's definitely an quickly evolving market, and it's becoming a bit of a new dynamic in North America around where oil is coming from and sources of oil and gas for the North American market.
Curtis, we have a question on the Port of Sheet Harbour. Can you expand further on your views about how the Port of Sheet Harbour can fit with some of the projects ahead and add value in the project environment? And then maybe after you will hear from Pierre and Patrick on the issue.
Yeah, I think, I commented a little bit earlier on the benefits or the value add for Sheet Harbour and how it complements what is done here in Halifax. In certainly if none of you have been there, it's a very large, wide open facility with basically access currently anyway for any type of business. And you know, what that presents, for example, in the offshore sector is an enormous amount of laydown space for fabrication work, simple transit of cargo, resupply, and things like that. It obviously did play a role in previous projects in the past, and I think that's a good evidence of what kind of value add it has. You know, aside from that, in the oil and gas sector, certainly you heard me mention earlier about project cargo movements. One of the critical factors in deciding which port they go to is a lot of times geography and its location relative to where the cargo is originating or destined for. And that's very much the case in the wind sector because of the larger overdimensional pieces. I mean, you might have a blade that's 160 feet long, for example. Many times, I can't say if this is the case in Nova Scotia, but certainly in many provinces, the Departments of Transportation actually will only permit transit through a closest port. So, you know, a lot of times you don't have a whole lot of choice, but in the case of Sheet Harbour, it's well positioned in the province in terms of location, both from a marine perspective and getting to any of those potential wind projects. With that wide open space, it's got a lot going for it. So certainly those couple of market sectors that port is ideally positioned for.
Yeah, for us, there's two things. Is when vessels are looking for, you know, run-in trouble and looking for a place to stop for longer than what a container terminal could offer, it's definitely a great option. And also for building project and a power generation, we need that type of space to be able to do those projects. So.
Okay, we've got time for about 2 questions before we wind this thing up on time. Pierre, how are you going to manage the challenge of Canadian content? And,
yeah, that's as probably some of you know. In order to be part of those government contracts, you need to meet Canadian content requirement, which is a great thing for Canada, but can be challenging. And the good thing in our business is nobody builds engine in Canada, so we're all on the pretty same level. But there's great opportunity to be able to do that. And the first one that we see is associating yourself with existing local company, and by that helping them growing and having them helping us do our business. And we already work with a number of company, and it's been so far very successful, and we plan on increasing that. Another area is associating yourself with a research and development project, either with university, college, and an industry, in order to help in this area. And the other area, which is very important, is growing our own presence in Canada. So growing our own business in Canada, increasing our facility, increasing the number of employees, increasing the service that we are offering. And you know, for us moving to the Port of Halifax, it's a step towards that. And as we grow, we will need more of that infrastructure available to support us. So that's how we plan.
thank you. Just before George comes up here to present you all with a case of Red Bull and a parting gift, we have one final wrap-up question. On this subject of the mega projects, if you could leave us with one message on the subject and how we should take advantage of it, what would you have to say to our audience?
Okay. Before I get to that, I just wanted to thank Patrick for not making us wear the red leather pants in honor of his incoming chair. That was the plan early on, but we decided not to go with that. It was a good call. Thank you. I guess I'll follow up a little bit on what Curtis said earlier in his presentation at the start, that you need to do your homework and be prepared for these opportunities when the expressions of interest come up. Each project is different, and as you mentioned, there's local content restrictions. There's, in some cases in the mining projects, native content restrictions that you have to be aware of and follow to the T. They're large international companies that have very high expectations, and you need to be very cost competitive to deal with these other companies that are involved in these competing bids, and whether that's investing in machinery and equipment or improving your labor skills in your company. Those are some of the things that you have to do to make sure that you're ready for those opportunities, and there is a tremendous amount out there and more on the horizon, so it's just making sure you position yourself for all that down the road.
Yeah, I think I would echo your comments, Patrick. I mean, the positioning is really what it's all about, but being cognizant of what it is you're going after. In our industry, our poor communities sometimes have a tendency to try and be everything to everybody, and that sometimes leaves things fairly without focus. I think if we're making the right investments, doing the homework, as you say, and planning to capitalize on and position ourselves appropriately for projects that make sense, then you're putting yourself in a position to have the best chance to succeed. And the addition of Sheet Harbour, for example, it's very much so a complementary port to the offerings in Halifax. So you've really rounded out its capabilities. That's the kind of thing I think that is rational, makes sense, and positions the poor community well for the future for some of these opportunities.
Yeah, for us, I guess the biggest challenge would be in moving in the future is the speed at which the project are moving forward. It is a very expensive business to be in, and in order to be successful and meet our goals in Canada, yeah, the speed at which those projects are being, announced and actually work being done, it's critical for private industry and a company like ours. So.
Well, thank you very much. I think you rose to the occasion. I really appreciate all the work you put into preparing today, bring your message here. Let's hear it for our panelists.